the thing I would like to encourage you while it's on my mind, please remember to write. What are your experiences? What are the stories of miracles and transformation that you've been having? Because we always make an effort to share. It's important to inspire other people. Because a lot of people out there, they're a little hesitant. They're not sure what it's going to do for them. So the more you can tell your story and I can share those stories, the more it's going to inspire other people to do the same. And remember, again, we're all in it together because consciousness is everything. And who's related to the consciousness of whom?
To each other.
The new people going, what kind of question is that? Right? We're all one. There's one consciousness. Isn't it interesting? Okay, this is a quick aside. Psychology talks about the collective unconscious. I don't know if you heard that term, with dreams and different things like this. I'm not sure, unless they're learning here, they really understand what that means. What are they really saying? The collective unconscious. That everybody's affecting everybody. Right? If there's a collective unconscious and you and I are sending conscious messages through that unconsciousness, then what are we doing? We're reaching and accessing the heart and soul of every human being on earth. They're just telling us in another way, like we often talk about it, there's a spiritual internet. And we're all on that spiritual internet. And the interesting part of it is, and the advantage for us is, unlike my computer, I can shut off my computer and in a way disconnect myself from the physical internet. Can I not?
Yes.
Yes, but on a spiritual level, you cannot disconnect yourself. Even you think negative people, are they disconnected from the internet, the spiritual internet? No, but they're influencing everyone else with negativity. The beauty for us is, if we know they're on the internet, even if they're doing negative things, what can you and I do as students of Kabbalah? We can send out so much light that our light overwhelms their darkness, their negativity. All right? Okay, so let's get started. So I remember a few years ago when I was teaching in Miami, we had a real estate agent. And he was working to sell like higher-end properties. Of course, he hadn't done it yet. So one thing he told me, which is what I'm sharing with you this morning, if he had a client who was coming to see a higher-end property, he would go out and he would rent a high-end car, and he'd dress in his nicest suit, right? And then he'd go out and show the property. So I remember thinking about that, you know, like why? Why would a person do that? Why was he renting whatever, an expensive car, to take a client to expensive property? Why didn't he just take his regular car and take them there? Appearances, impressions. He wanted to make a good impression on the client that he was on that level of doing business, right, with higher-end clients and higher-end property, right? Fake it till you make it. But the idea was good impression. He wanted to create a good impression of himself because he felt he was capable, he felt that he knew what he was doing, but he wanted to also make it seem to other people that same way. I often think, and every once in a while, talk about it in the classes, if the first time you came to Spiritual Sunday, I was dressed in a bathing suit and a tank top. Yeah. Generally, right? I might have more, thanks. People wouldn't take it seriously. To a certain extent, almost no matter what I would say, because first impressions are important. That's why we do what we do sometimes, to make a good first impression. Because we know those impressions stick in people's minds, right? It's how we appear to be. Sure, after a while, you get to know people, etc., etc., and yes, I guess I could teach in a bathing suit and a tank top, and for some of you it wouldn't make a difference. Maybe you and I should talk, okay? That's it. Okay, great. Okay. But if you think about so many things we do, how many of you ever went on a job interview? Oh, so when you go on a job interview, what do? You don't dress in your bathing suit and your tank top and say, look, here's my resume, I have 4 college degrees, I have 25 years experience, here, hire me. You dress up nicely anyway, because you want to make that impression, because we all tend to be affected by those first impressions, right? In fact, I'll tell you a quick story. The first job I got outside of my father's employ, because growing up, my father had a retail pharmacy, so I always worked for my dad. I'm not sure it was I wanted to work or he wanted me to work, but anyway, I always ended up working at the pharmacy. So the first job I had outside of that, I went for the interview. I'd graduated college, I had years of experience and this, that, and the other thing, but I'd never been to an interview. So naive me, I just dressed in like nice jeans and a button-down shirt, and I figured, okay, my resume speaks for itself. So I got the job. Now I'm even validated, right? It's okay. But after about 6 months, I was working with another guy, same job, same level, etc., and we found out that he had come to the interview in a suit and tie, and even though we had basically the same resume, the same experience, and we were doing literally the same job, he was being paid more. Yes, so I learned first impressions can be important, right? How many of you remember first dates?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you should hear them laughing out there, okay. Right? What do? You dress up nicely, you act nicely, you act in a way that you might normally not, right? Because you want to make a good impression. So we understand impressions are important, right? They do affect us. That's why we always do our affirmation, because if consciousness is everything and we've been impressed with false ideas, it's not always so easy to take out those impressions. And that's why even if for the greatest reasons on earth, yes, I really am suited for this job, I really want the job because I want to help the business, etc. Even with good intent, I still have to take into account my first impression. Dress nicely, act nicely, etc., etc. Yes, there are those people who do the opposite. They try and create an impression of something they're not, right? That's a different issue. We're talking about the people who are here and who are learning here, so of course we're always of good intent, etc. So we always want to make that good impression, because as we understand, impressions are going to be lasting, right? They're going to be impressed on people's minds. So our affirmation is take out the false impressions and put in good impression. To take out the negative and put in the positive. To take out the falsehoods and put in the truth. So that then, when we're drawing on our consciousness, in our daily actions, which are we going to draw on? The false or the true? The light or the darkness? That's it. That's it. It's that simple. What we impress ourselves with is what we're going to be living. How we impress our consciousness is going to be what we have to live with. You and I, because we're learning here in the Kabbalah Center, we understand that everything is cause and effect. So then the impressions that we make as we put it out there are what's going to come back to us. So we are learning now this morning to be more aware of what impressions we are making. Because you know they're saying, if they build it and they will come? You remember Field of Dreams? Yes? So now in Kabbalistic terms, meaning the vessel we create is the form of the light that will show up. So if we're creating positive actions, then those positive things will come back. And that's what we want to impress the world with. Now, you and I, because we're learning here, we're going to start with a thought from the Bible. And in this case, the Bible's pretty straightforward. You will be holy because I, God, am holy. Talking to every single one of us. And why does it have to be? I mean, we all believe in one way or another God is holy. We have all heard that we are created in the image and likeness of God. So why does it have to be emphasized that you will be holy, we will be holy, because I, God, am holy? Because so many times we don't accept that. We don't keep in our consciousness that we are pure beings of light, that we are in the image and likeness of the Creator, and therefore we have the talents, the abilities, and the capabilities the Creator has. We look in the mirror and we see less than. We don't always see that pure and perfect being. That's why I encourage you, as I do for myself, to put a little note on my mirror or wherever I'll look to remind myself I'm a pure and perfect being of light. because I have to continually to impress my consciousness with that and take out anything less than. Does that mean that I never act in a negative way? That I never do negative things? Thanks a lot. Okay. Yeah, of course we all do. The key is to understand that's not the real me. That's not the real me. The real me is pure and perfect being of light. We have the free will. I can cover it up. I can pretend to be something I am not. Here we're learning how to be congruent, that the inside of me and the outside are the same. But usually it's in the wrong way, like this. You know the story of Pharaoh? You heard of Pharaoh of Egypt? Yes. Right? So the Pharaoh, we know what happened to him in the end. That's the lesson. In the end, he got wiped out. Because on the inside, he didn't accept the fact that he truly was a channel of light, a being of light. He came to believe he was God. You know how bad it got? He took it so egotistically that he really was God, the God of the world. Well, I mean, how many of us think that God uses the restroom? I know it sounds silly, but what did Pharaoh do? At least this is how the Kabbalists teach. Every day Pharaoh would go down to the Nile River, and he would do his business in the Nile River, so that nobody would see him going to the bathroom. They'd be able to still think, and he would be able to make them believe he was God. Yes. Not very good with the Nile River. Okay. But let's think about in our life. How many times do we attempt to do things like that? Right? We attempt to be someone we're not. And I don't mean it like we're learning here. Yes, every day I want to be expressing more of the Creator that I am. I want to be sharing more of my light. That's true. But we don't want to put out false impressions. So it has to come back to, yes, we are holy because the Creator that created us is already holy. So there's a part of us that is already holy, just looking to get out. And it's up to us to let it out. That's the key, right? It's up to you and me. It's not anyone else. So then our work is really to do what? Express our godlike nature. But we have to keep reminding ourselves, what is a godlike nature? What are the attributes? What are the abilities? What are the behaviors of the Creator? And we have to take out all the false ones. And sadly, because the Bible is written to give us free will, some of the attributes that are given to God are not the very nice things that you and I would like to think of God. How many times have we read, God is jealous, or God is angry, or God is vengeful, or God is punishing? So those are false ideas. Those are not true. God does not punish, God does not reward. How can God reward us with more than it's already given us?
Yeah, 100%.
How can God reward us with more than it's already given us? We have 100% already. We can't get more than 100%. The same way, if we're going to say punish, how can God take away what it's already given us? It can't. Where's it going to go? The universe is filled 100%. There's nowhere for our goodness to go. It can only be revealed or concealed. That's it. But that's up to us. That's from us. How many of you ever looked at your friend and you see more good in your friend than they see in themselves? Ever? Every great Kabbalist throughout history saw the light of the Creator inside the people, every person, even when we didn't see it in ourselves. Now, what happens when we do that? If you follow that enough, and you're looking inside your friends or people around you, and you're seeing the light in them, and you're seeing the light in them, and you're seeing the light in them, one, what's automatically happening is more light coming out of you. Number two, you're drawing more light out of them. And as we'll keep the thought, every human being is already a pure and perfect being of light, then the more we draw out of them, then the more peaceful and more loving and more unified the world will be. Chaos will disappear like darkness in the face of light. It will just go away. It's not our job, and I want to make sure, if it's coming out now, it's not our job to make peace on earth. I want that to sink in for a minute because we think it is. Not our job to make peace on earth happen. It's not our job to change other people. It's our job to turn on so much light from our soul that the light will take away the darkness and the light will change people's hearts and minds as it's changed ours. It's not our job to make other people more peaceful. Right? That's why, with all respect, politics, diplomacy, things like that, they don't work long term. Because it's not our job to make other people change. It's our job to awaken the light in us, share the light with others, and that light will cause other people to change. Because the programming of the Creator is already inside. That's the key. That's the key. So if you think about it, it makes our job a lot simpler, doesn't it? Even at work, our job is to share with people. What they'll do with the light that's awakened in them is up to them and their programming. It's not up to us. So we can offer suggestions, we can offer support, but at the end of the story, just like this light, you turn on the light and darkness goes away. Can any of us tell, there's no scientist to this day that I've ever heard that can explain how light takes away darkness. We just know it does. But on a scientific level, they have no idea. You know why? Do you know why? Do you know why? Okay. Because science has no definition for darkness. Think about it. Look it up. What's the definition of darkness? Absence of light. No, I didn't ask you about the light. What's the definition of darkness?
The absence of light.
Oh, the absence of light. But tell me what the definition of darkness is without using the word light. We're stumped, right? So it's still related to the light. It's the absence of light from our perspective, not from reality. That's why there's no understanding how light will take away darkness, because light is the true, eternal existence. Darkness can only be temporary, physically and spiritually. So that's our work, awaken the light. So what I would like to try, worked very nice last week, so I thought here and there we'll try it again. I would like you to turn to a neighbor, and those of you who are on Facebook, just write it in the comments. Just three quickly. Turn to a neighbor and give 3 attributes of the Creator. Go ahead, just for 20 seconds. Turn to a neighbor, just share with them 3 attributes you think belong to the Creator. Yes, please write it on the comments and I'll take a look later. But it's also inspiring to other people. Let them see what all of you around the world are thinking. Okay, thank you. Look how easy that was. Now all we have to do is continue the list and realize that's who we really are. That's who we really are. Every Sunday we meditate on one of the 72 names of God. Which one of those 72 names has anything bad in it? Nothing, because the light is only the light. It's only goodness. So then we, in truth, only have goodness also. That's the whole idea. But we've allowed ourselves to cover ourselves up with anything but that light in various ways. So we may have our fear, our anger, our guilt, our shame, our greed, our egos, etc. But that's only temporary. And that's why we keep emphasizing here, it's not our real nature, right? The clothes are not me. Like we said, I could walk in bathing suit and a tank top. I can walk in this suit. I'm still the same person. You may perceive me differently. Or people out there may perceive us differently, but I'm the same person in the suit or in the bathing suit. I'm the same person. And my life, the beauty of it is, whatever you think of me doesn't change my destiny. My destiny is in my hands, as your destiny is in your hands, due to the actions. So then the more godlike we can behave, then the more light of the Creator we will get back in return. We just have to start overcoming our 5-sense illusion of the other people and the things around us. So there's a very nice concept I wanted to bring to us in this transformation of consciousness and the idea of impression. Because yes, like we said, if I walk in a suit, especially if you're new, you have a certain impression. versus if I walk in a bathing suit. So they say, and I've heard it recently, which is what caught my ear, clothes make the person. You heard that? Clothes make the person. Well, now if you're spiritual and you're learning Kabbalah, now you have a big conflict, don't you? No. Okay. Yes, because we are able to put the two, but it sounds like a conflict. We just said clothes don't make the person. We are who we are. The clothes can only change the impression of other people for a moment, but it can't change who we are. So, I wanted to put it now in a different context. Go back to Adam and Eve, and those of you who are newer, I'm not asking you to just believe there were Adam and Eve. We do. But I ask you also not just to dismiss it either, right? Don't throw it offhand, and you don't have to believe it, but at least listen and see how the concept works for you. So when Adam and Eve were created, they came out of the endless world, the first beings of light. They had not yet what some people call sinned, right? They hadn't created illusion in their life. There was just the reality of the light. So the Kabbalists teach that their being, right? Like you and I, we have flesh and blood. They didn't have flesh and blood. They were ethereal beings that just radiated light, right? Like you would imagine, just shining light beings. So it says that their skin, in essence, or what they were made up of, is called or, which is light. Light. Okay, can you say the word or? Or, light, right? The light of the Creator. So they're shining beings of light. When they sinned, when they came and fell into the illusion of their anger, jealousy, greed, ego, all the things that we call our human nature, then it says that God, if you read in the Bible, it says, and God made them coats of skin, right? So we, of course, think of what? The leather bikini and the leather bathing suit, right? Because they were naked, and now they sinned, so they knew they were naked, so God had to put them in clothes. That's what it says. But the word for the clothing that God made is also or. What was or? Light. But in the Aramaic, you change the first letter, sounds the same, but instead of light, it means flesh, like leather. Meaning after they fell into the illusion, then came the flesh and blood. So they exchanged their garments of light for their garments of flesh and blood. You and I, our job is to turn it back the other way, to radiate the light of the Creator through the flesh and blood, through living in this physical world. But we have to have that in our mind, because how are we going to change that? Has to be in our consciousness, the good impression. But now let's change it. So when I went in the job interview, who was I trying to impress?
The employer.
The employer, right? You go on that first date. Who are you trying to impress? The other person, right? Now I want us to think, yes, impressions, and we want to make a good impression, but metaphorically, who do we want to impress?
Ourselves.
We want to impress the Creator. Metaphorically, because we know it's not changing the thought of the Creator, but for us, in that same thought, I want to make a good impression. So if I'm thinking to impress the light, what's the only way I'm going to impress the light or the Creator? Behaving like the light. So then, every time that I look at my life and I say, you know what? Somebody I'm still holding some anger towards, still holding some animosity towards. Yes, any of you? Yes. So then think of it. In that way, then what are we creating? We are creating a coat of skin. We are creating the flesh and blood. We are blocking ourselves from the light of the Creator. So we are not going back to our original body of light. Our garment of light, we're now creating flesh and blood. We're blocking ourselves. We're blocking ourselves. So I had a student, for a while, was getting sick. Every so often getting like a regular thing, this particularly difficult ailment. And what did she do? You know who she had resentment towards? We might have called it guilt, but basically it's resentment. Towards herself. She felt guilty that she was being sick. What did she do? Somehow she was creating this, etc. So actually the paradox is, the more she was feeling guilty on herself for being ill, What was she creating? Garment of light or garment of flesh? Flesh. And as the flesh got thicker and thicker, so to speak, then the ailment just kept showing up. It would go away for a while, then it would come back again. And then it'd go away for a while and come back again. Then she started to apply a little bit more of the Kabbalah she was learning. And she started to be able to look in the mirror and see a being of light. She was able to take away the idea of the guilt. And then, when the illness came the next time, now she was able to just go right in and say, no, this is about the light. I've given enough into the flesh and blood, the illusion. Now I'm going to give in to the light. Now, in essence, like we're saying this morning, impressing the light. I want to impress the Creator that I am a greater light being. Because if I'm impressing the Creator, and again, metaphorically, because the Creator's thought of us doesn't change. It only sees perfection in us. But if I'm changing that impression from my point of view, then the Creator and I are a lot closer. Because the guilt she was holding was separating her from the light of the Creator. By taking away the guilt, she's closer. Creating a good impression, there's a closeness, aren't you? Right? Again, that good impression right away. You already feel more warm or accepting or closer to the person. So then the more she was just behaving, using the tools, she was scanning her Zohar, she was changing her consciousness, etc., then the illness went away. Miracles were happening in her health. Why? Because miracles come from the connection we have with the light. And it changed her. Like really miraculous things. One that virtually saved her life. Because she was willing to get rid of the guilt and just go right into healing. Healing the garment of flesh to create a garment of light. And so it transformed. So we've got to think in those same terms. Who are you holding resentment towards? Who are you holding animosity towards? Then today, you've got to think about it. Do you want just the body of flesh that's separate and distinct from everyone else, that can have all on its own all kinds of chaos and negativity? Or do you want to tap into the light of the Creator by transforming it? Forgiveness. One of the most powerful acts we can do. Forgive ourselves and forgive other people. We've just transformed our garment of flesh for a garment of light. Now we're radiating light. Now we're a better light being. That's what our job is. More loving, more kind, more forgiving, more generous, more tolerant, etc. All those things necessitate what? Our consciousness that we are holy beings, that we are beings of the light, that we are already filled with light, it's just waiting to be manifest. So then the actions we do are what impress the cosmos, and that's what we'll be living. That's what will be coming back to us. So when it says, yes, you are already holy, just be holy because God is holy. So it's already telling us what's our destiny. And in this we have no free will. Our destiny is to be light beings. There's no way we can stop it from happening because that's who we really are. What we're here in Kabbalah learning to do is speed up the process. Let's make it today. Find ways and means that you are giving into the garment of flesh and find a way to turn it into a garment of light. Forgiveness, kindness, certainty in the light. Forgive God. Some of us have to forgive God because we're still holding the anger against God. Things that happened to us, things that happened to our family around us. I don't remember if I shared the story. When I was 12 years old, my grandmother died. It was really the first death that I knew. So of course, she, among all my grandparents, she was the one that I was the closest to. So the rabbi came to visit, right? I was raised a Reformed Jew in California. The rabbi came to visit, and he's sitting with my parents. It was my mother's stepmother, but the only grandmother I knew. So he's talking to my parents. I don't even know what he was saying. All I remember is I asked him one question. I said, Rabbi, did my grandmother go to heaven? So remember, I'm 12 years old. So he tells me, you know, we don't know heaven, hell. We're here just to be a good person, right? Because we don't know why God does what God does. So 12 years old, what did I understand from the rabbi? God took my grandmother. God took my grandmother. So that had been impressed in my mind since I was 12 years old. 20 years old, I started on my spiritual path. I was learning science of mind. I was learning other things, right? 30 years old, I come to the Kabbalah Center. Now I'm learning this. Many, many years, I'm in the Kabbalah Center teaching what we're teaching here. The power of the light, it's not a human being, it's pure and perfect, we're pure and perfect, etc. I'd seen miracles, transformation in my life. One day in my meditations, I realized that my 12-year-old was still holding on to resentment to God. I mean, how could I have resentment to God? I saw all kinds of miracles in my own family, people in the students in the center, etc. I couldn't have fathomed that I was still holding something against God. But in this meditation, I remembered the story I just told you. I remember being the 12-year-old, being told by this rabbi, we don't know why God does what God does. So the 12-year-old still holding the resentment had to be healed. I had to change his garment of flesh into a garment of light. And that's what I did. So by unblocking the 12-year-old, what happened to me? I was also, I became 12 again. I was, in a way, yeah. My 12-year-old now didn't think that God took my grandmother. My 12-year-old began to understand what I understand and what we're learning here, that the light is the light. It's only goodness, it's only love, it's only life. So we're here in every way, shape, or form today to turn all the garments of flesh into the garment of light. And that's why, isn't it amazing, the last number of years, everybody's interested in auras. Read the auras, look at the auras around us, and they start talking about how you could feel the person's aura and the person's vibe, etc. What are they really talking about? The garment of light. That's all we're saying. So the more you and I uncover ourselves from the flesh, the illusion, the physicality, and the negative aspects of that, then the more the garment of light will be showing, will be shining. Do you remember the movie Cocoon? There was a movie Cocoon. Go back and see it. There's one place. It's a nice movie anyway, but there's that one part where they're on the ship and these entities, whatever, they take off, right? They unzip the body of flesh, and all of a sudden, what are they? Just beings of light. You see it exactly what we're talking about. So if you need a visual, go back and watch the movie. So wonderful. And that's what we're doing every day. It's our job to unzip, if you will, another piece of the garment of flesh and allow the garment of light to show up. Because our purpose is, and we're very close, to get back to Adam and Eve, to get back to that. But we've got to be able to look in the mirror and see. I have another student who was just telling me, she'd been a number of years in the center, doing all kinds of good things, helping to bring people to the center, create miracles for her family, etc., etc. But in conversations with her, you find out that when she looks in the mirror, she still doesn't see a pure and perfect being. She can't even, or hadn't, been able to give herself credit for the good things that she did. So I know I've said this before with a different student, but I made her, it was just last week. That's why it's fresh in my mind. After all these years, I'm looking at her. And she still, even she realizes, though, that she goes back to the same thing. All the good she does and all the good she does is tainted by the vision of herself. So in this case, I literally had to drag her. Not drag her this way, but like hold her by the hand. I took her out from the bookstore. I took her out here into the hallway where we have mirrors. And I made her stand in front of that mirror and look at herself and say, I love you. You have no idea. She was crying. She looking in the mirror, she couldn't even say it. You could already see the tears start. You could feel the hesitancy, etc. And she knew enough that I wasn't going to give up. So her only option was run out the side door, right? Because she wasn't coming back this way if she wasn't going to say, I love you in the mirror. And it took her about 5 minutes. Literally. She looked at herself. You could see the tears, you could feel the shaking, etc. But eventually she looked at it. And she was able to look in her mirror and say, yes, I love you. You do good things. And it's transformed her whole being. It's like another layer of that flesh came off and another layer of the light showed up. So remember, we're all here to make good impressions. But the most powerful way, we said before when we first started, why do we do this together? Why is it so valuable to have so many people together, unified, even when we do our affirmation? Because the more we do it together, right, then the more we each get from the collective energy we create here. So when we can look at each other and we can see the light being in each other, then we know we're drawing more of the light being out of us. And before we close, there's a very nice story comes to my mind. There was a very evil man that was controlling back in the medieval times. Right? He was controlling the town because he was so evil that if anybody did what he didn't like, right, he would just inform the government if he had to make up lies about them. And of course, in those days, the government would just come and take people away, either kill them and execute them, or they'd put them in jail forever. So everybody was scared of him. So of course, Kabbalist comes into town to become the spiritual leader, and everybody's saying, telling him, giving him the lay of the ground, as they say. This people do this and this and this. And that person, evil. Stay away. And tells him the whole history. So what do you think the Kabbalist does? It's another opportunity to take off the garment of flesh and put on the garment of light. The evil man asks him to do something, and what does the Kabbalist say? What does the Kabbalist say? No way! No way! It's not the right thing. I'm not going to do it. So the evil man goes, and of course, he takes off in a huff. He's angry, etc., etc. So he says, a few hours later, the Kabbalist is walking out with one of his servant, like his valet, let's call him. They're walking out in the field, and all of a sudden they hear, a horse coming. And they look off in the distance, and here's this evil man. And this evil man coming with a sword, and he's swinging the sword, and he's screaming at the Kabbalist and screaming, coming to kill you, I'm coming to kill you. So the valet, the assistant, he starts running and hiding behind the bush. The Kabbalist, what does he do? He just starts staring. He's staring at the guy and staring at the guy and staring at him as he's coming closer and closer and closer and closer, and he's just staring. The guy comes, he jumps off his horse, he takes his sword as he comes up to the Kabbalist, and he drops his sword on the ground, he falls down and he's crying at the feet of the Kabbalist. And he begs him forgiveness. So the Kabbalist talks to him a few minutes, tells him what to do, he goes off. The guy comes from behind the bush, he says, I've never seen anything like that. He says, what did you do? How did that happen? I know this guy for years. He says, no. He says, I just looked at the light being inside him. I looked at the God aspect inside him, the DNA of the Creator, and by seeing that in him, I was awakening in him. So he came to understand his negativity, and he came to ask forgiveness to transform his, as we're calling it, the garment of flesh to the garment of light. So today, if you want your garment of flesh to be less influential and the garment of light to be more expressive, then today's the day that we think, yes, if it'll motivate you, I want to impress God by my light behavior. I want to impress God by greater acts of forgiveness, kindness, generosity, tolerance, etc., because those God-like actions will activate the greater light of my being of light. And when I see it in other people, then I'm using other people also to help increase the light that I reveal and the light that they reveal. Because the light of the Creator is always win-win. It cannot be win for one and loss for another. So then the more today we decide that we're going to remove, that I want to. I was sharing before, every night I do a few minutes before, desire is everything. Whatever your desire is what will motivate you. So today I ask you to awaken inside the desire to impress the Creator, the desire for the being of light, the desire for the garments of light that we were given in the Garden of Eden, that it still belonged to us. Today's the day we go to our spiritual closet and we take out the garment of light and we remove the garment of flesh. And we bring back on ourselves the garment of light, the garment of peace and love, unconditional love. Oneness, unity, the whole concept of love your neighbor as yourself is when I put on the garment of light or more of it on me, then I see more of it in you. The more I see more of the light in you, then the more I awaken the light in me. It's a win-win proposition. So yes, it's the light that will remove all the pain and suffering from the world. But it's you and I, the people who are here learning, that we have the capability of turning on so much light that every human being out there who's in anything less than the garment of light will remove their garments of flesh, they will reveal their garments of light, and then we will see what we've all strived for, what we've all wanted for thousands of years, heaven on earth as a reality in our time. God bless. Okay. Just a reminder, those of you who don't have one of these yet, I encourage you to get one. It's called the Pocket Zohar. Right? It's ultimately the mission of the center to spread the Zohar because we know the miracles that happen from the light that shines out of these. Those of you who are new, we're going to do a meditation using the Aramaic letters, right, which the Zohar is written in. So it's not about awakening our intellect. It's awakening the light of the Creator inside of us. All right? And I just want to remind you, some of you may have been here then, but someone was telling me, even he's been a student in the center for a while, you know, this whole thing that's now transforming with North Korea. Because he came to me, he was very happy. He says, Chaim, you know what's going on with North Korea? I said, no, what's that? He says, well, you know, now they're willing to deal to get rid of their nuclear weapons and blah, 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 all this stuff like this. I said, well, do you know what happened 2 months ago? And he looked at me, and he's been around. Somehow he didn't hear it. So I want to make sure you know it. He said, well, a couple months ago, right, before the first words from North Korea that they were willing to negotiate, we had a group of about 8 or 9 students who were willing to fly into South Korea with a number of these books and other forms of the Zohar, the bigger ones or whatever. They got as close to North Korea as they can, right on the border. They went into, one guy snuck into the Olympic Village and placed Zohar there. Somebody got into the room where the North and South were going to negotiate and put some Zohar there. And they spread Zohar everywhere they could in South Korea, to the police, to the firemen, to the soldiers, what have you. About whatever it was, a week, 10 days later, all of a sudden came the news that North Korea was willing to talk. And everything's come from that. And this guy's looking at me. He's been a student in the center. He says, really? Really? I said, yeah, you know all the other stories. This is the same thing. Because we're still coming from the garment of flesh. We still don't believe, to some extent, that the light of the Creator is what transforms the planet, will transform our heart and soul. Right? It's not what you learn in the center. It's the light that comes through what you learn and the light that you're awakening by using the tools and applying the wisdom. That's what's changing your life. It's the light that you channel that takes away the darkness. So your gift, and that's what we're about to do now, the offering, but your gifts, your support of the center is helping us to spread more of the Zohar around the world, to send more people out into the world, to bring this light to everybody. And as the light will awaken, we're seeing transformation. We're seeing things change from the most dense physicality, called natural disasters, fires, floods, hurricanes, and earthquakes, to the things that deal with us on a more personal level. People's health, their business, their prosperity, their family relationships, and things like that. It all changes. Protection on the street. It will all transform through the light of the Creator. So that's why we always take these few moments to bless our offering, because your gifts allow us to expand and send more light out to the world. So if you'll hold your gifts, it is a free will offering. But if you hold your gifts in your hand, for those who are on Facebook, while I remember, because I got a few messages this week. If you go on Facebook, right, and you'll find where the link for the donation page. When you go to that page, one, they tell me to make sure to let you know it is a secure page. And number two, when you get on the page, scroll down. Don't look at whatever else is written there. You see a picture of the Boca building. Scroll down, and there you can fill out your information. Somebody told me it's a little confusing, so I want to straighten that out. So let's all just hold our offerings in our hands. Just inject our light. Remembering the more light comes out of us, the more we're transforming that garment of flesh to the garment of light. The more people's lives that we transform, again, more transformation for them and us. So we're injecting this gift, this offering, with our heart and our soul, with the light of the Creator, in gratitude for what the Creator has given us, the talents and the abilities that we use to live our lives, to have all that we have, to experience the joy and the fulfillment to the extent that we have, and then causing it to grow. Reaching out to every person on earth with these gifts, that we know all that blessing will reflect back to us, and holding together the vision of every human being dressed in their garment of light. Gratitude and appreciation, and an acknowledgement of all the blessings that they may increase for us and others. We send it out into the world and we say together, Amen. Thank you for joining us. We do appreciate all your support. And please make sure that, if you want to see it again, it is on my Facebook page, the one that says Spiritual Sunday. We changed the banner, right? And share it. I know I keep reminding you because people keep telling me, I didn't realize how easy, they didn't know how to do it. So just share it with others and it'll reach out there. We'll get more people from around the world and there'll be beacons of light for all of us also.